Hello, good morning, good evening, good day, good afternoon, and aloha. Welcome back to another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UAP and UFO. My name's Luis Jimenez. Before we get started with today's show, of course, we want to pay some bills. I want to remind you that the show's available on podcasts, on Spotify, iTunes. Check it out pretty much right after the show to be available. We've got Patreon, so please support us that way. We've got Super Chats. If you've got a dying question for our guest today, who is John Ramirez, former retired CIA agent. And man, holy cow, I cannot wait to start with this show. So don't forget to like, subscribe, share, ring the bell. That way you are notified anytime we go live. Everybody's links who will be on the show is down below, with the exception of Brooke Lopez, because he does not have any sort of social media presence, and it's his first time on the show. I think you guys are going to enjoy him a lot. But before we get there, of course, want to say thank you to the KGRA-DB family, everyone listening out there on the radio. Don't forget to tune in after this show for Andy. Andy actually signaled Dan is going to be doing the show by himself live today for the first time. He's going to be hosting the show without Andy. That'll be the first time he's going to do it. So fingers crossed there. I'm sure he's going to do a killer job. So don't forget to catch them right after our show. So let's bring in our two co-hosts, shall we? Mr. Rather Be Squidding, Mr. Michael Mataluni. Gentlemen, how we doing?
Doing great.
Doing good. Looking forward to this.
Michael, you're a little out of focus. You okay?
You got me? Are we,
Are
we good?
Yeah, I see. Yeah, you've gone to a whole new setup because Michael's moving. Full disclosure, Michael's in the middle of a move. This might be his last show before he breaks everything down.
My office keeps shrinking and shrinking as we pack up for the move. So I'm here in this little corner now. It's a tiny corner, but we're here.
I'm glad you still have the Tic Tacs behind you.
Still got the Tic Tacs, baby.
Still got the Tic Tacs. Love it. All right. Well, gentlemen, we've got a really, really fun show today. Before we get started, is there anything else I forgot? Did I forget anything, rather?
I
think I got everything. Yeah, I think I got everything. All right, cool. Just please, sometimes I'm like, did I say and do and thank everybody? Oh, yeah, DOS Tapes. They provide all the music that you hear below. Make sure you check out their SoundCloud. They provide all the tunes. So, yeah, check out the DOS Tape stuff. All right, so without further ado, let's bring in our fourth co-host for the day, and that is Brooks Lopez. Brooks is a program planner in the defense industry and has a degree in psychology with a focus in neuroscience and learning and memory. He also has his MBA with a focus in international business. Brooks, welcome to the Unidentified Celebrity Review, my dude.
Thanks for having me. I think this has been kind of a long time coming.
First timer club, too.
Yeah, first timer club, man. I'm so happy you're here because this is going to be a really cool conversation. And let's just go ahead and bring him on because we've got 2 hours, and I think this is going to be another one of those time warp bubbles that we step into where it's 2 hours and it really feels like 12 minutes. So let's get right into it. Without further ado, we've got Mr. John Ramirez. Now, if you guys are not familiar with John, let me tell you a little bit about him. So John is served from 1984 to 2009 in the CIA with a doctorate in science and technology, a doctorate in intelligence, and the ODNI National Counterproliferation Center. At the CIA, he was an intelligence analyst in chief, ELINT Analysis Branch, specializing in ballistic missile defense, weapon systems, radars, and technical collection operations. At the NCPC, he was the SIGINT specialist and the multidiscipline collection requirements strategist. John is a U.S. Navy veteran in the electronics warfare technician field on the board surface ships. John also majored in political science and graduated in 1983 from George Washington University in Washington, D.C. And he's also a member of the Association of Former Intelligence Officers and the Central Intelligence Retirees Association.
Wow.
Without further ado,
what have I been doing with my life?
We have all been wasting our lives compared to this man's resume. Mr. John Ramirez, welcome to the Unidentified Celebrity Review. Thank you for coming aboard and getting weird with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is the first time for me too, so I'm another first timer.
Yeah, 2 first timers on the show, so this will be fun. Okay, So I guess let's start here because I want to just get this right out of the way. You've come out of nowhere, and I think the biggest fear, and I know this is one of Michael's biggest fears, is nobody wants to be made a fool of. Nobody wants to look like a fool. Nobody wants to overbelieve anything. And in this field, it's rampant with sort of people making claims that they can't back up. And so I think the biggest thing with the John Ramirez story and sort of the lore that you've just thrown in here in the last 2 months is they're like, is this guy really from the CIA? How do we know this, right? We've seen paperwork, but that could be photoshopped. We've heard him explain it, and sort of the catch-22 or the double-edged sword of if he shows you a picture of getting the medal, well, I could have photoshopped this. It's a never-ending story of how we cannot confirm this. So the one thing that Rather up here, I can see his face already. Rather was like, well, if he got a medal, why doesn't he show us the medal? That could easily solve a lot of these problems. And so I wrote John and I was like, hey, John, just want to give you the heads up. Because it was a courtesy of Rather we didn't want to catch anybody from left field. And this is not gotcha journalism. We're not 60 Minutes, and we don't want to appear rude and question the validity of who you are. It's a fine tap dance that we have to do to sort of ask this question. But the question from Rather was, well, let's see the medal. Let's see the medal that he claims he got when he was in the CIA. And so, John, you want to show us the medal?
Absolutely. And this is exclusive for you because no one ever asked me to show anything on the air.
Right.
Okay. So I got the Career Intelligence Medal actually after I retired, because it takes a while to do the paperwork to catch up with you. So they delivered it to me after I retired, but it was for service up through 30 September 2009. And so it came in a box. I don't know if you can see that, but it's going to be like reversed because of the camera. There's the CIA. Well, it's upside down, isn't it?
It's upside down. There you go. Yeah, now we see it. Yeah.
There, now you can see it. Okay.
Yeah.
And so the Career Intelligence Medal actually looks like that.
There you go.
And you
there you go, Rather.
Well, yeah.
It says for honorable service, John F. Ramirez, 1984 to 2009. So there. So how do you know I didn't get this on eBay?
That'd be a heck of a thing to fabricate.
I tell you, it's a lot harder to fake that than an unsigned PDF doc, right?
Here we go.
I appreciate that.
This is the Career Intelligence Medal certification. It's signed by Leon Panetta, who was the director of Central Intelligence Agency the year I retired. And of course, it's dated 2010. As I said, it followed me after I retired. So there it is.
That's all. I do, just have one follow-up question. That's certainly proof enough for me. But why would you post the unsigned, digital document as proof?
Well, that was in reference to someone asked about ballistic missiles, and they had a lot of questions about ballistic missiles. And so I opined about what I know about ballistic missiles. Particularly, as you might have seen, there's a ballistic missile test which went awry. And the pictures are of this blue spiral in the sky over Scandinavia. And a lot of folks said, oh, that's a UFO, that's a UAP. And I said, no, what's going on is it's the Bulava submarine launched ballistic missile. They launched it from the Barents Sea. The missile's designed to have its warhead land in Kamchatka, clear across the Russian landmass. And this missile is directional, and it had something called a gimbaled nozzle. And of all the tests, 6 of them failed. And when they failed, the gimbal nozzle just went wacky. And so the missile itself has aluminum oxide as a major fuel component. And aluminum oxide, guess what? Sapphire. Sapphire is mostly aluminum oxide. Sapphire is blue. So this thing was literally outputting sapphire, aluminum oxide. And so it spiraled and spiraled and spiraled. And so you get this spiral in the sky, but that's what it was. It wasn't exactly a UFO or UAP. And so you have guys like James Auberg, who is known to be a debunker, I would say. And you have guys like Mike West, who say, no, that's not a UAP, it's this and that. And so in that instance, I agree with them that how they describe that spiral is exactly what they say. It was not a UFO UAP. And just because it looks strange in the sky doesn't necessarily make it a UFO or a UAP. So because of that explanation, and how do you know? I said, well, my job was, one of the jobs was ballistic missile analysis. And the certification said that I was known at CIA for being an expert on worldwide ballistic missiles. And that's how I know about what happened to the Bulova tests.
And so that's
sure, yeah. I think in hindsight, if you would have posted a picture of the medal and the signed document, I think we could have avoided some.
Yeah,
some
but it wasn't in context of that. I just said, okay, this is how I know about ballistic missiles.
Well, you know what's funny is we got Witness Citizen who interviewed you a few weeks ago saying it's a chocolate.
Can we see you bite it?
Can we see you bite it?
Joking.
No, give me a break. Rather, can we see
joking.
you bite it?
I'm joking.
Oh man, that's funny. Okay, well, I'm glad we got that out of the way, and I'm sure that goes a long way in making you feel better as far as what we'll be talking about going forward, right? I mean, that's huge. He's never done that.
Yeah,
before.
totally. I've listened to all of your interviews, and you sound like you know what you're talking about, but I don't when it comes to the CIA and the FOIA and these government agencies. So,
right.
So yeah, that does go a long way to backing up your claims, and
Sure.
I really appreciate it.
And by the way, I don't have a doctorate in anything. I think what I said was I was with the Directorate of Intelligence.
And
the Directorate of Science and Technology. I don't have a doctorate. I just have a bachelor's of arts.
Yeah, I misread that, John, because
University.
I was rushing to find your bio as I was stalling, and I was like, "Oh,
you did a good job."
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Sometimes we hide
your
stuff.
acting skills came to play.
There you go.
I was curious where I could get a doctorate in science and technology. That sounded like an awesome doctorate to get.
Well, thank you for clearing that up. Okay, so let's dive right into it.
Yeah.
And one of the, I mean, all of us, it was the homework assignment for the whole crew. Go listen to these interviews with John Ramirez. Let's try and get some really great questions for him based off some of the stuff he said. So where I want to start with you is this PAVE pause radar satellite.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So the thing that stuck out to me here was that you said this radar system, it's pointed southward over the Pacific Ocean with the primary purpose of locating submarine ballistic missiles. And you said it also has got the capability of tracking things that are going 8,000 meters per second.
Yes.
And then when I did the math, that's Mach 24.
Yeah.
What moves at Mach 24 that we're tracking?
Reentry vehicles of ballistic missiles. If you look up reentry vehicles, and I tell people, I use a lot of terms like RVs instead of saying reentry vehicles, and they go, RV, that recreational vehicle? No. To a missile scientist or a missile analyst, it's a reentry vehicle. If you look them up, they look like sugar cones. Basically, they're cones. And inside, there's something called a physics package, the thing that goes boom. And they get released in the exo-atmosphere or outside the atmosphere. They sit on something called a post-boost vehicle, and they get popped out one by one, and they're maneuverable independently. And once they pop out and they go in, they're not powered in any way. It's just the force of gravity pulling them in. And they go up about 700 miles up, and then they come down. And when they come down, they go 8,000 meters per second. Wow. That's how fast they go. And as you could see them as streaks in the sky, the blink of an eye, I mean, they're done. They're already hit.
Yeah.
And so these radars are designed to track something that fast.
Right.
And also satellites too. They track satellites when they're not doing anything. Like, we're not going to get missiles launched at us on a 24/7 basis. So when they're not working to look for ballistic missile launches, they are tracking satellites. And as they're tracking satellites in space, they see things that don't match what we know as the two-line ephemeris. It's two lines of math. Basically, you put it into a algorithm and you spit it into a computer, and it plots, using Kepler's laws of motion, it plots satellite trajectories. So we can predict, where all the satellites are. And there's last flight check, there was 29,000 pieces of junk up there, including real satellites, but 29,000 objects with these two-line element sets that NORAD tracks.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you see things that, hey, it's not in the database. What is it? So they can remove all of that data and just track what's of interest. And that's when you see the UAPs. As I said, flying in formation under intelligent control with intent to go to a destination. So these two radars, one is pointing toward the South Atlantic, one's pointing toward the South Pacific. There's two up north, North Atlantic and North Pacific over the poles. The ones up north are doing most of the work, because if we get a ballistic missile attack from China or Russia, they're going to follow the Arctic Circle route. But submarines, they'll launch from the ocean. And so those two that I mentioned are watching for any kind of missile attacks from the ocean. Otherwise, they're just tracking satellites. And the Russians have them too.
Well, just because you said submarines, and what I'm gathering kind of based off what you said is that we have filter systems on these satellite systems that can see through water. So essentially these submarines can't hide. And like if you're a submarine and an adversarial submarine off of the coast of California, we see you no matter what. It's kind of what I got from what you were saying. Am I wrong on that? Or is that a simplification?
It is a simplification.
Okay.
The way we track submarines is because something of that big, that metallic, will create a disturbance in the gravitational and magnetic fields of the Earth. And so we have airplanes. The newest one is called the P-8 Poseidon. They used to be called the P-3 Orion. But the P-3 Orion, if you see those, they're more commonly known. They have something on the stern or the back of the airplane called a stinger. It's like a pole with a device at the end. And that's known as a magnetic anomaly detector. So they fly over the ocean and they can detect disturbances in the Earth's magnetic field. Mm-hmm. That points to something underneath the water. The only way a satellite can see a submarine is if it pops up its periscope. And most submarines don't do that, especially ballistic missile submarines. The whole intent of a ballistic missile submarine is to stay hidden. So if you've seen, it's a great movie.
Hunt for Red October?
Hunt for Red October. Yeah. I was thinking about the Crimson Tide is a good one.
Okay.
Crimson Tide, you have the USS Alabama, which is a real ballistic missile submarine. And it goes out somewhere and just hovers, basically stations itself. And that location is secret, and it doesn't want to move very much, because once it moves, our adversary knows that there's something there. So it stays there waiting for a emergency action message, which is basically national command authority saying, we're at war, and you can authenticate the codes, and you've seen the movie.
Right.
So the movie actually accurately portrays what it takes to launch a ballistic missile from a submarine. And you don't want to show yourself. So you're not going to pop up periscope. Fast attacks, which are tactical more, they don't carry ballistic missiles, but they can carry cruise missiles shot out of its torpedo tubes. It can also be considered a strategic weapon. They're more likely to pop up their periscopes. And when they do, they're not up there for long because they're just doing a look-see. In fact, they may, at that point, they put up what's known as the ECM mast. They look for electromagnetic emanations around, and they come right back down, and they go down and off they go. They're hidden.
Right.
So you can't see a submarine from a satellite. However, suppose you have a radar satellite.
Right.
A satellite carrying a radar. There's some limited degree of penetration of the water with a radar. The electromagnetic waves are kind of bouncing off water because water is opaque to it, but certain frequencies, it can penetrate the water to a certain degree. But unless the submarine is at periscope depth, you won't see it at all. And having said that, the secret part is there might be something under the water that's pre-placed, pre-positioned, so we can track things. And that's the Navy doesn't want me to talk about that.
Right. Okay. All. Well, so one more question, then I'm going to open it up to the rest of you guys. Yeah. You did say that we were catching formations of UAP on the satellite systems and also a trajectory. Could you tell us where they were going?
See, one thing everyone should know is that the United States intelligence community does not conduct operations over U.S. airspace, not the intelligence community, not what I call Title 50, what the ODNI controls. She doesn't spy over the U.S. She doesn't spy against our partners, the other Four Eyes, Australia, Canada, UK, New Zealand. We don't look at that. We look at Russia. So when I say we saw UAPs in formation, I'm saying over Russian airspace.
Got it. But you said they had a trajectory. What was the trajectory? Can you give us a clue as where they were headed?
It was flying from the Arctic Circle over the Russian landmass.
Wow.
And can you give us an idea of what the formation or what the objects look like, or what the sensors were able to detect of those objects?
The sensors at the time were, and here again, I can talk about the Defense Support Program because that's an old program. It's been up there since 1970. Without encroaching on the NDA, which means that, I have to still protect sources and methods of what we still have operational up there. So I can't talk about specifically, but let's say a satellite with an IR capability can see these. And so when you see these, they're basically like what people see on the ground. I mean, people have shot video of these orange orbs, and it doesn't look any different than that. They look like orange orbs.
Can you say anything about like the flight characteristics, or what makes you think that they're not just prosaic, drones or something like that?
Speed. They were flying at like tremendous speed.
With changing of directions, or just the speed?
No. I mean, they were exhibiting like the 5 properties that Lou always likes to talk about, the 5 properties of UAPs, and the ability to like maneuver in an instant, the speed itself, the characteristics of signature management, of being able to change its masking signature, its IR reflectivity characteristics, transmission characteristics. It looks like light, but it's like changing shape, size, and also 600 nanometers. It's orange. They were orange. So that cued us into the fact that there was something up there that's highly unusual. And we didn't know. I mean, people have seen orbs all the time, right? But from a intelligence community perspective, there were anecdotes, right? And so until we put the sensors up there in space that can actually look at these things, and as we improve the sensors, and that's where I'm going toward NDA, because the DSP is a crappy sensor. It's being replaced. It's basically, oh yeah, somebody, launched a missile. Big deal. Yeah, we know there's a launch, but the newer sensors, they can actually do measurements of, what light spectrum it's in and other types of characteristics. So they were multispectral, meaning they had 4 IR bands. And so we can divide up the IR spectrum into 4 bins. And so you give it a little bit more resolution. And because we had those types of sensors flying, that's when we detected these orbs. And the first thing, of course, we thought was, oh my gosh, the Russians have this super secret weapon we didn't know about, and we need to find out what they have.
And what year was this? What year are you referring?
I'm going to let the intelligence community people out there and the counterintelligence people out there know that I got this from Wikipedia. Here's my source, Wikipedia. Okay, so the Canon KH-11 Block 2, the second in the series of KH-11 satellites, carried an IR payload. And that was launched in the early 90s. And I'll say that much. So when we had that type of capability beyond the DSP, when we had a better capability to look at the IR spectrum, that's when we start noticing that there were these orbs. And this was in the early 90s.
Well, speaking of the DSP, you mentioned in a previous interview the Bob Fish emails, and him having a story where he came out of a ship and someone came out and said, "Hey, I saw something on the DSP that was zooming and made a 30-degree turn," and they called it a fast walker. And I think you said that there was some mistakes in that.
DSP would not be able to do that. The DSPs, they basically they actually had a blink on, blink off kind of duty cycle. They weren't persistent collectors, and that's why we flew so many of them. And they didn't last long. I mean, we had to keep replacing the constellation over and over and over again. And they were basically just like looking for like instances of light, of something that looked like a launch, like the boost vehicle, the first stage of a missile launch. And they're looking at specific areas where we knew already there were ballistic missile silos in the Soviet Union. So that was their primary focus. And back then, China didn't have silo-based missiles like they do now. So we're primarily focused on that area of the world. I would say the Eastern Hemisphere. They would not be looking over anything near U.S. territory at all as much, because we wanted to look at that side of the world.
Does that make you question his story? Do you think that maybe it's
there's a lot of things in the Bob Fish story that seems to me like as told to Bob Fish by someone else. The fact that he mentioned there was a top secret SCI cafeteria. I've been there. The cafeteria is in Boeing. It's in El Segundo, and it's not top secret SCI. Anybody can go in there as long as you had a badge. So it was one of the better cafeterias in El Segundo. And so we had guys from Aerospace and Northrop Grumman and everybody else there because they had like the best food ever. I mean, I recommend the pasta bar. So when I went there, we went there specifically to talk about those space radars that I told you about. And so Boeing actually built the space radar for the US because they screwed up the electro-optical system. They had a giant contract to completely refurbish and renovate the entire US imagery constellation. It was called the Future Imagery Architecture. And before, we had a company that really knew what they were doing, and they were called like Lockheed Martin. They knew how to build satellites for that. But back then, Congress thought, oh, we need to compete. And so Boeing put the best proposal together, and Lockheed lost the contract. So Boeing was responsible for building all these satellites. They built the radar satellite called Topaz, T-O-P-A-Z. And I can say that, folks, it's on Wikipedia, so don't arrest me. So Topaz was Boeing's bird, and of the entire FIA constellation, Topaz was the only one that survived. The rest was shit-canned, literally. I mean, can I say that? Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
well,
we're on the radio. Try not to again.
Billions of taxpayers' money went down the drain.
Yeah.
Oh boy, Boeing would be pissed now. But they built great Topaz radar satellites, so I give them that. All right. So
wow.
You guys built great satellites. And so we were there to get a briefing on the status of Topaz. They wanted to build more. And I was there as representing the National Counterproliferation Center, which is all about nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons, foreign operations, foreign activities related to that. And we were thinking that these satellites would be really useful to monitor NBC because it's electromagnetic waves. And sometimes when electromagnetic waves hits the so-called baby formula factory, they bounce back signals that look like this isn't a baby formula factory because we can tell what's in the
air
atmosphere around it.
Yeah.
That's really getting close to NDA. So anyway, that's why I was there. And so we went down to the cafeteria, and there were other people there, and the Boeing sponsors for us said, yeah, this is the cafeteria where everybody comes to. And there were people there that were like custodial staff, and like everybody can eat there as long as you had a badge.
Yeah. So
you show the badge to the guy at the front door that you're going to the cafeteria, and they'll let you in. So it's not a top secret SCI. And in fact, you get fired if you talk top secret SCI in the open area like that. You'll be gone in a heartbeat. Your clearances will be pulled.
So what you're
that
saying,
I doubt it. That's not a top secret SCI cafeteria.
And
the pasta was excellent. They actually made the pasta from flour.
I was gonna say, they
made the pasta noodles by hand.
The odds of getting into this pasta bar, you're saying I got a chance. There's a chance.
You got a chance. You got to work for one of those contractors.
All right. All right.
So
that's probably the biggest nugget of information we're going to get out of you.
There's more.
But man,
full of nuggets.
I kind of want to poke you a little bit on the atmospheric readings, and that is cool. That is very cool. But real quick, I do want to know, and then I'm going to get to these super chat questions, you guys. I see it in here. Trust me, we'll get to them. But were these orbs basically seen as soon as these satellite systems were put into place? I mean, how often does this happen where we see these formations and USOs and UAP flying in the atmosphere?
I can't say USOs because what we saw were orbs.
Okay.
Not something coming out of the ocean. There were things flying from the North Pole. They will. I'll just say they were flying in the vicinity of the Arctic Circle because I'm working on a FOIA to let me say exactly where they came from and where they went. That would like burst open the entire field.
What's your current maneuverability? Like, how do you, what is your NDA based on? Like, what are you allowed to say? What are you not allowed to say?
I'm allowed to say, well, NDA protects sources and methods. So I know how the U.S. intelligence community collects data. I know how we extract data from a hard target meaning like China or Russia, which has its own counterintelligence operations to prevent their people from talking to our people. So I know how we extract that data safely that protects the lives of our officers and protects the lives of our sources, the real agents. And so I have to protect that. And so they're like technical capabilities, they're human capabilities related to that. And I will always protect those. And so when, for example, when Luz asks certain questions, that's what's in the back of his mind, that I got to protect those sources and methods because they're still in use. Even though we're retired, if we blurt out, oh, this is how we do it, it might literally put a perishable source at risk. And when I mean perishable, that source might die. And fragile methods, we'll never be able to use the extraction method again. So it will completely be gravely damaging to U.S. national security. So that's what I'm protecting. The information is not so, unless the information points to how I got the information.
Well, do you see a path or a route for this information to eventually trickle its way to the American people, the American taxpayer?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why the Gillibrand Amendment to the NDAA, and also it's not just the NDAA, we have an Intelligence Authorization Act, IAA, which also has UAP language in the legislation. They must pass intact with no editing, with no removal. I mean, they got to pass because that provides us, people like me, people like Lou, people still in government, it provides us with what we call top cover. We have a law of the land. Right. And now because we have a law of the land, Mr. Contractor, defense contractor, you're hiding all of these secrets. When you get called before Congress and Congress asks you, it can be closed session, but you can't say, I refuse to testify. Because the next thing you know, the U.S. Marshals will be knocking on your door because refusing to testify before Congress is considered an obstruction of justice.
Right.
And the Department of Justice will indict you and prosecute you for obstructing justice because it is a legal function, constitutional function of the Congress to have oversight over the defense community, intelligence community, and our contractors. Once you accept money from the government, by extension, you are the government. You just don't do government functions. There's a clause in most contracts that say that a contractor shall not have inherent government functions or responsibilities. But otherwise, by extension, you are the government. So they need to come clean. And it could be behind closed doors, but somebody needs to know exactly what's going on. And that so gets reported.
Got it. And so you're no longer under government contract at all?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. My retirement is handled by the Office of Personnel Management, which is the personnel office for the entire U.S. government. So I got transferred from CIA to OPM. My only contact with CIA is when I do things like that presentation, or I'm working on getting my medical records from CIA right now. I need to go back to CIA. I have a number. It's not 007, but there is a number of several digits, and I give them that number, and they have my name. And being CIA, I mean, they know where I live, they know my phone number, they know my email address, they know my social security number. I give them all that, but that proves to them that I am who I am. And now they really know who I am because I've been out on all these interviews.
I was going to say, have you gotten any calls from the CIA since then? Since starting?
No, I've been contacting them back and forth because it's a dialogue I have. When I do these things, I need to let them know that if I provide new information, I need to vet that information through them. So far, I haven't done so because that presentation is basically intact. The front part of that presentation was done in about 2015 to 2016. So I have been sitting on the front part one, for a long time. And 2, 3, 4, and 5, I did recently. And so the entire package went to CIA, and it came right back to me, completely unredacted. So I didn't do a very good job.
we talk about the NDAs and stuff. I'm curious about how compartmentalized the CIA is. Say, you're studying the ballistic missiles and you find some weird things in the sky over Russia, and you write up a report on that. Would the same people be investigating that on the ground, or would they hand it off to another part of the agency to then go investigate? And if they did hand it off, would they ever find out the results of that investigation?
Well, I would just use the general case of how we do intelligence. And basically, we have a source, and in this case, it was an NRO source. I can say that because I put it in my presentation, and CIA didn't redact it. So the NRO has space assets they fly, and for various customers. And there are basically 2 customers. They fly for NGA because NGA wants pictures, and they fly for NSA because NSA wants signals. And so in this case, it was pictures. It was something in imagery. And so when they see that NGA, they're all like top secret SCI cleared. And they may have compartments within NGA, but they're all cleared. To work in NGA, basically everyone has the same level of clearance. And so they saw something, right? And so they said, that's interesting. And then they did exactly what I said in the slide. They went to CIA, they went to DIA. What do you guys know about what the Russians have flying up in space? Because we saw this over Russian airspace. So DIA does their thing. We did our thing. We got our experts to look at it, and they're all TS SCI cleared for that data. Because to get an SCI, you're already like pretty high up in terms of eligibility to get other compartments. So we did the analysis, and it's still pretty much top secret SCI like everyone has in the building. And so there's no like special compartment yet. And so when my engineers were done and they reported back to our principal, who was tagged to represent this subject matter area. He was the one guy that was the subject matter experts that then talked to other subject matter experts within his or her own agency. Our guy then took it back up to NGA and NRO. And so everybody, his counterparts throughout the intelligence community did the same. And so at that point, it's still top secret SCI. And they said, we need a working group to look at this. That's when the compartment started. Because in order to look at what we saw at the top secret SCI level, my engineers needed to be read into what we have flying that is like that. And that's when they got cleared into what we have. And so then they got cleared into what we know about what we think UFOs are really like. So they got cleared into that. And they got cleared all the way. Like, I think they went back to Roswell. Because they had that compartment.
But were you cleared into this stuff as well?
Absolutely. I refused. A smart CIA officer will know this. Never ask for more compartments than you can work. Because the more compartments you have, that's more work for you. So I try to get rid of my 26 compartments.
I would sign almost any contract you gave me if they told me they'd tell me the secrets.
So I would don't tell me if I don't know, because I can function without it.
Right.
I got read to a point. It wasn't even a reading. I mean, it was like, oh, we need a couple of your engineers. And I go, why? And so, well, here's why. Right. So, okay. Now, I didn't say anything about that for a long time until 2017. Until Lou Elizondo, until he started talking about orbs, and people are talking about orbs and tic tac and go fast and gimbal. And that, all right, okay, now I can talk about, yeah, we saw these things like way back when, because it's the cat's out of the bag, right?
Right.
And James Lukatsky wrote his book, Skinwalkers of the Pentagon, and then he mentioned orbs. And so, like, okay, it's out of the bag, right? So I'm freer to talk about what we saw back then. But back then, I wouldn't have said a word. Even if I was retired at that point, I couldn't have said anything about what I saw. But thanks to the recent revelations, I can. So I'm not answering your question. I think I lost your question somewhere, and you were talking about compartments.
Well, yeah. It's kind of, if would you know? And I guess that kind of raises the question of there might be other people at the CIA who might know what these are, UFOs or otherwise, right? But it wouldn't be you at this point.
And then John.
No, I have to. I make an informed speculation. That's why I call it informed, because I know what we saw, and I have to speculate what it might be. And so that's where my value comes in, and that Lou can also do informed speculation.
Right.
But he's also extremely informed. And Jim Simivan and all these folks, and I'm using their names without getting their permission, but I mean, they're public figures now, right?
Right.
So Chris Mellon and all those guys, they know what's up there. But they still have clearances. I don't. So they still have to protect what they know. I, on the other hand, can talk about something that happened decades ago, because what happened decades ago is now in the public domain and released officially. So I'm a little freer to put more context into what I say. And so the compartment came later, when the working group was started. And so at that point, I was out of the picture. I needed to be briefed to a point where I had two of my engineers. I was responsible for writing performance appraisal reports. We know them as PARs. So I need to evaluate their work. And how can I evaluate their work unless I know why they're flying to, and I'll say it, St. Louis, Missouri, NGA West for these meetings? And then they came back, and so I had to sign their travel orders, sign for their airplane tickets and sign for their hotel accommodations, right? And their what we call MIE, meals and incidental expenses, and sign for all that. So I need to know what they were doing. And they also came back and said, boss, we need a safe. So, okay, now I have to order why you need a safe. Well, we got this super secret compartment, and which you're not read into, but we need to throw things in there because we can't put it in the regular safe. So, okay. So that's how I got to know what they're doing. So they were throwing things in there left and right.
Brooks, did they look wide-eyed and scared when they came back and talked to you?
Yeah.
No, they knew I was interested in UFOs, because at my desk back in the days when monitors were not this like flat panel I have in front of me, but there were these big ass CRTs. On this big ass CRT that says Dell, I had a UFO doll, ET doll, a gray, which actually was colored green. It's gray, and I used to set it on there. And everyone knew I was interested in UFOs, and everyone knew that it was my hobby, and everyone knew that I used to go to UFO conferences on my own dime, paying for my own airplane tickets and conference fees and hotels. So the interest in UFOs was well known, and I connected with other people at the agency who had this as a hobby. Huh. We never studied it like as a thing, but we had it as a hobby, and it wasn't really studied as a thing until, I described the orbs. But I believe there were people in the agency who already knew what was going on. Wow. And that was slide 54, my infamous hybrid slide. And I always say, that was told to me. That was one of 3 briefings I got on this phenomenon that's related to UFOs and UAPs and who might be driving them.
So one of
But I thought you weren't read into that stuff.
I wasn't. Somebody screwed up. Or somebody, I don't know what the situation was. I told CIA that, there's going to be a slide about hybrids, and here's how I knew. And I told CIA directly the meeting I was in, about the time it occurred, the 2 senior officers who sponsored the meeting, and other people who were there in the meeting. which were CIA officers, might be other intelligence officers, but I recognize 2 CIA officers personally that I knew, plus a whole bunch of academics I didn't know, because we had a sign-in sheet, and when they signed in their email addresses, they had .edu after their email addresses. The rest of us have .gov. So I knew that, okay, this was an interesting briefing, and it was at a hotel. And I identified the hotel, the CIA. I was at this hotel, and gave them the address. And as I went upstairs, there was no security officer, no badges, and I could carry my cell phone into the meeting. That tells you right there that that's an unclassified meeting, folks.
And who were you instructed to? Who instructed you to attend the meeting?
That's one of the names I can't mention. I don't have permission to meet.
But yet. You were instructed.
I was invited. No, I wasn't instructed. I was invited.
You were invited.
People invited me. Know I was interested in UFOs, and that they knew that interest. All right. So the one tidbit I have is that the folks who sponsor the meetings, the office that sponsored them is the same office that was the successor to the office Kit Green worked in. Kit Green worked for the Office of Research and Development. Go ahead.
If this meeting wasn't classified, though, why can't you tell us who arranged it and tell us more about it?
Because, again, when I name CIA officers, I need to get CIA's permission. Right. There's a thing called the Intelligence.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Sure.
Intelligence Identities Protection Act, IIPA. You cannot independently name a CIA officer. I can self-proclaim.
Sure, no, that makes sense. You don't want to out the
exactly.
CIA.
I don't know what their clearance status was at all.
Do you know why they set up this meeting though? Like, what context were they telling you this information? Were you researching something that you needed to know?
I don't know. That's the mystery of it all. That's kind of a bizarre way to share information, because even if it was shared at that level of what I think I was told, you would think there would be in a skiff. It wasn't. Right. It was a whole.
You think it's possible that they might have been feeding you misinformation or some other kind of weird thing going on?
No, because I reached back to other folks and confirmed the fact that what they knew was the actual truth, and plus who they were in the building. Yeah.
Did they provide any evidence that this was true, or did they just say that this is kind of the theory that they were going with?
No, it's not a theory. They actually stated what they stated.
So
fact. And then I confirmed it later with others.
So they stated it to you as fact. So your report that you shared was not your speculation. You're sharing what was stated to you
in an open meeting.
Fact.
Oh, you're talking about slide 54?
Right.
It was shared with that group of people, which I would say numbered like maybe 3 or 4 dozen at the most.
But it was not held in a closed area, as you said. You were able to bring your own cell phone in with you. You weren't searched, nothing like that.
Nope.
And I mean, so it was presented as fact, as in it was just said as fact, but there was no proof or anything to back up that fact?
No, because when you have people at that level, who they were, saying you that, CIA officers don't.
That's a pretty big claim.
That is not. It is not. You have to understand the culture of CIA. When that person at that level says something like that, he can back it up, and then I go back and then ask later about this, and then have that confirmed. And then this was before the Orb working group.
Orb working group.
Yeah. No, it's in the slide. It's in the slides.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in the slides. There was a Orb working group that occurred way before ALSAP. ALSAP was after the Title 50 civilian side of intelligence was done with the Orb working group, and there we don't look at it like it's a threat. We look at the science and technology aspects of
Treat
that.
it as a phenomena.
And then we toss it over to Title 10, which is DOD. And of course, DOD survives on everything being a threat.
Right. So this was explained to you as fact. And was this like, I guess I'm struggling to understand the context of the briefing and what was the goal? Was it just to disseminate this information throughout interested parties in the CIA so they could continue to do intelligence?
There were 3 items on the agenda. One was a historical look back at CIA's relationship with UFOs in general. And that's where slide 53 was the McMinnville UFO, the famous one in 1950. And that was briefed as, this is an authentic UFO. And because the reason why it's never been successfully debunked is because it is authentic and we know it. That was there. Number 2 was hybrids. And number 3 was the future of information technology will explode. We're working with a company to disseminate and allow a dialogue of information like this and other information.
John, is
and
this
that
the
company is Google. Google.
Okay.
Google, because we had a relationship with Google already. We provided them with Earth Viewer, which became Google Earth, and we provided them with search tools, which became Google Search.
Is that different than the company, the business, or the company that you referenced last week on the on your interview with I apologize, Andy
McGrillen?
Andy McGrillen.
Which company did I mention there?
You said that after the interview you were going to discuss a company via Twitter.
That was Cosmos ID.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you were referencing Google as that company.
No, that's Cosmos ID. That's a very interesting company.
Well, I'm still hung up on the hybrids, right? Because if there were aliens interventing with our DNA, there would be records of it. That's kind of a falsifiable thing. And when you go and you look at the biology and the DNA history and stuff, there isn't any evidence of that.
There's evidence that there are reptilian. There's science is now seeing that there was a common reptilian ancestor.
Well, sure, that's right? Evolution, right?
Okay,
yeah,
that's evolution, right? Now, what I was told that, one point that I'll talk about without getting CIA's permission. Since World War II, we learned that there has been an alien hybridization of humans.
Exclusively since World War II?
World War II. That's when the CIA learned about it.
Okay.
World War II. That's what prompted me to look back at World War II and say, okay, where did this information come from?
But still, it should be a DNA record of that. We should be able to tell that.
Absolutely. And that's what's not released. That's still...
Well, but I mean, this is being done by academics. It's, the government doesn't do the DNA research.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Well, sure, but I would... it's not private, right? There's no classification of our DNA. You can't classify looking into our DNA. You can classify our DNA? You think that they're holding secrets of our DNA from us?
Certainly.
How could they do that?
Because the law allows CIA and the intelligence community to do operations like that because no one bothers to read the law.
So you think that they're going into like the university biology programs and saying don't study this, you can't publish these documents?
No, that's not the way it's done.
Wouldn't that mean they're also redacting information from organizations like 23andMe and Ancestry and those others?
Once you give your blood, once you give your saliva to 23andMe and these others, if you read the fine print, you gave away your DNA for the purposes of creating
scientific research. Yeah,
big pharma can buy it. It's for sale.
But then is the CIA and other intelligence organizations working directly with these companies to limit what information they put back out to the populace?
I don't know. I don't know that. That's why I mentioned Cosmos ID, because there's a company involved in the human genome, involved in bioinformatics, involved in DNA. And then you look at the company, and then you look at who are the consultants to that company. It's a who's who of IC officers. And the company was started by somebody from the National Science Foundation. And so if you go back to FOIA and you go back to National Science Foundation and you research who these people are, all of a sudden you go, oh my gosh, these guys are really well connected. In fact, one of the officers was CEO of EG&G. EG&G was the parking lot where Eric W. Davis allegedly had his conversation with Admiral Wilson. He went to the EG&G facility in North Las Vegas. And the guy who was the CEO of that company, who is the operations maintenance contractor at Area 51, is part of the scientific consultation team for Cosmos ID.
Has this company IPO'd yet? Can I still get it on the ground floor?
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't trust them, but I do trust the university academics who study our DNA record and tell us that back in the day there were other intelligent hominoid species and that we killed them all. They can tell us fascinating things with our DNA history and
the Denisovians and the Neanderthals.
Yeah,
the tragedy of that meeting was that not only was the meeting unclassified, the agenda was unclassified, and so was the sign-up sheet.
Well, I say the real tragedy is that they didn't actually provide any evidence for their claims, right?
Oh no, but it's discoverable.
And hey, John, what was the third, before we go any further, what was the third? You had the historical.
Right, I mentioned that Google. They said that they actually said in the future, all this information will be searchable with a device that you can hold in the palm of your hand. We are working toward that device.
And their partner at the time was Google.
Google. Creators of Android, the operating system.
So real quick, I just want to go back one more time to the hybrids and so when they spoke to you about this was something that they were saying. Did they say why they believe this or what they discovered that points to this idea of human reptilian hybrids?
I had to research that on my own. They didn't make that connection.
Did you research it in classified documents or just kind of like online?
No, online. Just putting it together.
But they said specifically that. But they didn't provide any evidence. But they said this
after
is specific.
World War II. Yes, that they discovered that humans are hybrids after World War II. So in my mind, they said, okay, do we know of how we could have gotten alien DNA after World War II? And then I go, Roswell crash, bodies. Were there actually bodies recovered? Did we go back into the bodies and find evidence of humanization, their DNA and ours and theirs? I don't know. But other officers the other officer who claimed that he saw the Roswell files, Chase Brandon, said, yep, there were like non-human intelligences recovered from the Roswell crash. He said he saw it. And then he had to write a novel to describe how it goes all the way back to the Atlantean period.
Well, yeah, I'd say that, if they did find alien bodies that had, weird DNA that is alien and ours, wouldn't the kind of obvious answer be that those alien bodies are hybrids and that
exactly.
But you're saying that we're hybrids, right?
We're hybrids. They're hybrids.
Some of us, right? Is that wouldn't it be the only?
All of us are hybrids. Some are more hybridized than others.
Okay.
And
but it could.
One point, they told us that we know there are certain families that have been hybridized to a greater extent than others, and we will be following those families.
That's where I think a lot of people really take a concern with this theory, because that sounds a lot like David Ickey's reptilian theory.
Yeah, but I mean, he's
kind of anti-Semitic, right?
He's thinking like I've not read any of his books. I tried not to read because I want to be unfiltered. But if he's going with like this hybridization being part of a plot to control the world and they're evil, and I don't buy that. I just buy the fact that that
they're controlling families, powerful families.
No. That some in ancient past, some families are related to those families who were enhanced a little more than others. And so I'm going with that, and that's a hard one to swallow. I understand. Yeah. Right, but I mean, I can't swallow it either. I'm just telling you, this is what I was told, and so that's a research point for others to research or to debunk or to not believe. I mean, it's up to you.
From a purely semantic standpoint, I mean, we do have DNA variances across humanity. So even if it wasn't, I mean, not to parse it too much, but even if it wasn't a direct influence from an extraterrestrial peoples of some kind, we obviously know that different people have different DNA markers. So it would be very analogous to identifying things. So when we talk about a group of families, it doesn't necessarily have to be a specific ethnicity. It doesn't necessarily have to be a specific religious group.
Right.
I mean, it could be across, just something that we treat as genetic anomaly.
Mm-hmm. But if there is a genetic anomaly that, we can't trace back, that was just introduced at World War II, I would be shocked if academics would overlook that or not be able to find that.
So that's what I'm curious, because John, you had said ancient families, but then we also have the World War II. So was it we found out during World War II and it had happened prior to that, but we didn't realize it till World War II?
Somebody told us.
Okay.
And so that's why you're kind of relating it to Roswell. Not so much somebody told us, but hey, maybe we just found out after this Roswell crash, after doing an autopsy and running.
It gets more complicated than that. Yeah. And that's what prompted Lou to go in his soliloquy. I mean, he did a very somber soliloquy. You guys probably remember when he did a really brilliant soliloquy about suppose everything we've been taught in schools by your parents, by your churches, et cetera, was wrong. We're wrong. Suppose all of that is wrong. And so, I mean, I urge people to find that and actually listen to the context of that. That's the closest he got. And that where he said there may have been an enhancement of our DNA 70,000 years ago. He put 70,000 an actual year. I never heard 70,000 until he said it. But I mean, I am very confident that the government is sitting on this. And in order to understand the UAP in its entirety, where it came from, why they're here, who's driving them, you have to go back to, like, what's our role? Why are they here talking to us? Why do they want to interact with us? And you have to get past, you got to build that bridge to the fact that we are hybrids and we may have been hybridized by them, and they themselves may be hybrids, in order to get back to the true UAP story and why it's so secret. Because this will, if the government actually, if the President Biden actually says we're all hybrids and, we're alien hybrids, well, what would happen? The stock market would plunge. I mean, everything would just collapse, and that can't happen. So you have to have this, what I call this controlled dissemination, a little at a time. Let's talk about, we already know about the craft. Okay, there's things in the air, great. And now for the first time, somebody in position of authority, like the DNI, Avril Haines, said, that the extraterrestrial component to this. That's the second thing that needs to be talked about and go from there. To go any further than that, you need the top cover. You need a law that says people can now talk about it. And that's why that bill in Congress, the one in the Senate, the IAA, the NDAA in the Senate, that is so important. Because without that, this conversation stops and we're back to where we are, just speculating.
So when you're talking about sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, sorry, Michael. I was just saying that just reminds me, you still got time to call your congressman and senator. Use our website, the Big Phone Home. We've got templates there if you guys don't know what to say when you call, and push for this NDAA, because it's important either way. I mean, this legislation should be passed. And so just a quick reminder, you still could call your congressman. You can still email them, write them, tweet them, whatever you got to do. Sorry, Michael, you were saying.
Oh, I was just going to say, just a question for you regarding your experience in the CIA and your experience in this particular meeting. I think one of the things that I'm noticing is that it's a foregone conclusion that we're being visited. It's a foregone conclusion that we've been manipulated by these beings. But that being said, if you don't have specific evidence from the CIA in their communication with you, what level of skepticism do you hold when it comes to believing what a higher up in the government tells you? Like, I'd always be extremely skeptical. I don't know if I'm ever going to be all in 100% believe anybody when it comes to this topic. But I think it's important to keep an open mind. So
Right.
I'm trying to gauge your skepticism level.
Yeah. I came in as a believer. So I would admit that I was biased toward holding that before I walked into the building for the first time in 1984, due to all the experiences I've had as an experiencer. So I came into the building as a believer, not as a skeptic. And in the building, I met other believers. I met more believers than skeptics in the building. And I know that there are people there who actually know the truth about what's going on. But again, that's a foilable.
How can you know that though?
How can I know?
If you don't know, yeah, if you don't know the truth, how can you know that other people know the truth?
There is a code within CIA that we do not lie to each other. We do not lie to each other.
So at the very least,
it's hard to describe
what
that.
they were telling you.
Pardon me?
So at the very least, they believed what they were telling you, even if what they believed may not have been what we'll
and some of them are informed.
Truth,
I know that some of them are informed. I know that because of their position and what they analyze, that they are informed. So
they could be mistaken. No chance for them being mistaken.
I think they have access to compartmented intelligence that I don't and others don't. I think there are people who actually know what's going on, and they're holding it tightly. Now, some of that is being released. Some of that's loosening up. And I think we're on the road for that to occur. Because now we can talk about who's driving. When you say extraterrestrial at that DNI level, now you're talking about not the craft, but the drivers. Yeah. And that's the next step. So I think slowly but surely that realization will come to fruition.
It's interesting because one of the things that you mentioned earlier is something that you had direct contact with, and that was these orbs. But you're also alluding to, physical, biological beings, as well as, and I'm curious what your take is on UFOs or UAPs that are believed to be structured, like the Tic Tac. So what's the relationship in your mind between the orbs that you had direct evidence of and these other objects?
The orbs that we saw through the infrared sensors in space, they're flying really fast. And when they go through the upper atmosphere, they're going to cause, I'm not a physicist, but I'll say it's a plasma field or some kind of field which envelops them into that type of manifestation. What we saw was slow. Tic Tac was slow. I mean, the FA-18, as fast as it flies, those Tic Tacs can fly probably a lot faster because there's been evidence that they can climb to, one thing I heard was 80,000 feet in a second or something like that. Right. So they can go fast, but they were almost like putting on a show, slowing it down so that we can see them. And Lou says that there's a 23-minute video where it was great detail. And that the DOD is sitting on it. And that's they're posing for pictures. The UAP task force report says that they had an interest in our sensor systems. Those sensor systems include signals intelligence sensors and imagery intelligence sensors and MASINT IR sensors. And if they have an interest in them, that means that they slow down enough for us to sense them and take pictures. That's probably.
Yeah, you previously said that they were going really fast. So you saying they would go slow and then zoom off?
Yeah. And when we saw them close to the surface of the water, when the Navy saw them, they're flying a lot slower than they can go. It's almost like, okay, yeah, we know the F-18 go fly this fast, and we'll just keep pace with you and just follow us. It's almost like, I call it a demonstration.
Yeah.
More than anything.
An air show.
But then there are orbs that people see that are mysterious, that they see over their homes or in the sky near, where they're at, driving in a car, they may see them and they're zipping across, or sometimes they stop, they make maneuvers.
Well, the former Secretary of the Navy echoed something very similar where, we've got all of these real world legitimate threats, North Korea, South Korea,
Not
all
South
sorts
Korea.
or not South Korea, excuse me, but this idea of nuclear threat from North Korea. You've got the Chinese, you've got all sorts of stuff going on in Africa. And then you've got this UAP thing where they're out there. We know they're out there. It's almost kind of like they know we know, and
exactly.
they're not doing anything, and so therefore the importance of them goes way down because they don't seem to be a threat.
They're not a threat. They don't act in a threatening way. What we perceive as a threat is basically, I think, beneficial. If you review Robert Saleh's revelations about what happened at Malmstrom Air Force Base with the Minuteman IIs, they did humanity a favor. It's reported that in Russia, they enabled the launch, and U.S., they disabled the launch. And by the way, the nukes were never at jeopardy. I mean, the nukes were still nukes. If you understand how nuclear weapons inside a missile, how they operate, and you realize that they didn't disable the nukes. They disabled the ability to launch the missile, which basically you're disabling the offensive capability. In our scheme of things, it was the counter-strike capability that we had as a policy. We wouldn't fire first unless the Russians did, and then we'll fire second. That's counter-strike. They had a first strike. So a first strike, you want to turn them on. And so how does that feel? Does that make you uncomfortable to have all your missiles turned on?
Right.
And then for us, how does it feel not to respond to an attack when you can't launch in response? And sure enough,
it's almost like they played on their worst fears.
And sure enough, like a few months later, LBJ and his counterpart, Alexei Kosygin, got together, and that's the first time that both sides talked about in earnest reducing the amount of nuclear weapons we have in our inventories. And that's happened months after that incident. So I have to believe that that's the message they wanted us to understand.
John, that makes me think back to something I've heard you say on other interviews where you talk about the deliberate dissemination of some of this information through things like Hollywood or science fiction. So given your belief that there are individuals in the intelligence community that have a closer or a more broad understanding of what the actual agenda is, do you think that dissemination is to lead to things like nuclear proliferation, as well as, or maybe something else? And what might that be?
There's two levels of that. One of this is pretty mundane. The mundane one is that CIA definitely, and the Defense Department definitely want to put their best feet forward in the public perception. So a lot of it is tell us, portray us in a good light. But the other part is, as you say, some dissemination through entertainment means of this information. So there has been that going on. In fact, I point out to the Men in Black, the two movies with Will Smith and
Tommy Lee
Jones. Tommy Lee Jones's first cousin, as I stated before, was Chase Brandon, the guy who wrote Crypto's Conundrum, the guy who said, "I solved the Roswell files." And so, there's some connection there. And he wrote the book as a novel. And so he went on Coast to Coast AM, and promptly I haven't heard from him. So I asked around back at the agency, folks back there, guys ever hear what happened to Chase Brandon? They can't find him. He's off the grid.
Wow.
But he wrote this wonderful book that actually tied in a lot of things I said on slide 54. I read the book, but I wasn't influenced by that book because what I thought in slides 50, Crypto's Conundrum. And what he used was the sculpture in between our original headquarters building and our new headquarters building. It's in the courtyard. It's encrypted, and there's a contest to see what it says. And I don't know if it's been broken yet. I think a physicist, I think, in my parent office may have broken part of it. But he based it on that. And he based it on this guy, Chalmers is his main character, and he traced his ancestry back toward time and back toward Atlantean times, all the way forward to CIA. Now, this book was published in 2012. It was written after he retired. I think he retired maybe shortly after or right before I did. In it, he said something that most people didn't know at the time. He said that there are underground objects. These are USOs underground, not underground, under surface, that fly out of the water and into the water. Now, when he wrote his novel, that wasn't like really known that well, that a lot of these objects are in the water, and that's how we see them. So I know he's well informed in that perspective. If anything, having him on where I'm at right near sitting, I mean, he would be a much more interesting guest, because I think he's one of those people that was read into the whole story because he's seen the files.
Well, that's gonna have to be my next homework assignment. Let's get to a couple of questions that we have from the audience real quick. One from Magical Joshua Logan. It's been sitting up here for a little while. Lieutenant Graves said the UAP first behaved oblivious to fighter jets, and eventually there was a near miss. Opinion from John Ramirez.
I wasn't there, so I can't say why there was a near miss. Oblivious. I would have to believe that there are sensor systems on these craft as well that they can avoid being hit, unless they want it to be hit because they want it to crash. There's this theory I heard about the gifting fields. Have you heard that theory?
No.
There's a theory about the gifting fields. I forget which ufologists first discussed gifting fields, but sometimes they deliberately leave things. They crash so that we will have things to study. And these areas are called gifting fields. And I need to research that myself. I think Jacques Vallée might be the source of that. He might know more about the gifting fields. But I have to believe that they would be ways to avoid, because in most instances, when you get close to them, they shoot off and go away. You know, that they're hard to like approach in that manner.
Yeah, I really like The Arrival's take on that, which is pretty fascinating if you haven't seen it.
Yes, that's a great movie.
Kind of reminds me of another question, though, is do you think that the U.S. government really holds all the cards here in disclosure, or are there other governments that might be able to preempt us, or the Galileo Project and stuff like that?
Oh my gosh, I think the work of ICER, for example, the International Coalition Extraterrestrial Research, is important because that is an international organization of ufologists, and these are serious people, scientists and whatnot, studying this phenomenon. That's important. Also, I know Russia is sitting on a ton of information. I don't know too much about China unless it's something we told them. Nori talked about the fact that most people don't know the United States and China at the intelligence level, we're close cooperating friends, and that we built like SIGINT sites all over China for them. But there's some cooperation with these governments, and Russia especially. I mean, they're the guys that actually spotted on the radar, their radar, the equivalent of pave poles in Russia, Pechora, looking up north toward the poles. They spotted these objects as well, and they went to high alert because they say it's not, we don't know what it is. And
I'm surprised. Yeah, I'm surprised to hear you say that we're partnering with China in some of this stuff, because Bill Nelson recently said in the Iglesias forum that Russia we had previously worked with, but the relations with NASA and China apparently aren't that
not
great.
With NASA. Not with NASA, but
with the IC they are.
CIA and NSA had a very close relationship with Chinese intelligence.
Was this up until a certain point, or still?
I don't know. When I retired in 2009, that relationship was ongoing, and I posted 3 open source articles, one by the New York Times, one by the Washington Post, and one by United Press International. And also the book written by a former director of Central Intelligence, Robert Gates, where he mentioned the reason why we built these is because we actually had them in Iran and we lost them. And then we had to approach China to see if they'd be interested in hosting us. and they were hemming and hawing. And then we sent a young U.S. senator that paved the way, talked to Deng Xiaoping, and convinced Deng Xiaoping that this is good for both of our countries. That senator is now U.S. president right now. When he was senator, Senator Biden approached the Chinese to help CIA enter the country. And we brought the first computers there. They've never seen an IBM PC. We brought the first IBM PC there. We brought what would be considered to them a supercomputer they could not have built themselves. It was built by Digital Equipment Corporation. It was called a PDP-11-70. So we brought that there. We brought everything that you would think would be at Menwith Hill in UK and in Alice Springs, Pine Gap in Australia. Miniature versions of that we brought there. The ray domes, everything. I mean, it looked like, you know, like if you look at a picture of Pine Gap, it looked like that, except much smaller. And we taught them everything. I mean, I taught at their schools, teaching PLA officers how to analyze Russian radars. We gave them our software. I mean, it's unbelievable how close we were. You know, where
if you had to take a guess, do you think that relationship is still going on?
I don't know. After 2017.
Yeah.
After 2017, I don't know what happened. I think we're trying to repair that.
I hope so.
But they have a lot to offer, and so we compete economically, and but militarily, there's a rumor that they stole everything from us. You'd be surprised how much the Chinese can do. They're good at math. They know how to figure things out. They need the material science, and so they have the material science to build what they need. But as far as designing things, they're really good at designing things. Their weapons are outstanding.
They also have a ton of rare earth elements that we need.
Yeah, speaking of rare earth, the titanium in the used in the A-12, which is the Oxcart, the CIA A-12, the titanium came from the Soviet Union.
Wow.
I mean, the cooperation is crazy. I mean,
yeah, well, you have to cooperate. I mean, I always talk about the border on Afghanistan. It's a border that's always been trying to be conquered, but even no matter what sort of quarrels going on above, in the caves below, they're trading with everybody. Like there's trade happening with Pakistan. There's trade happening with all of the countries that surround that section of the world, or Afghanistan, Russia. So it's a necessity. I mean, we have to talk to our enemies, and they have to talk to us at some point. But I'm hoping that it gets back to a point where it was when you retired, where it's a little more amicable from both sides, because I think that would be better for everyone.
Yeah, the NDAA and the IA pretty much states that there's to be cooperation, international cooperation,
right?
In terms of the information that we hold, we need to, like, at least from government to government, we can declassify things or present things at a lower classification. You heard of the 5 eyes? Now there's talk about creating a 9 eyes and a 14 eyes.
Well, wow.
And that's for just sharing information. And so I heard of need to know. A DNI in the past, I believe, was Jim Clapper. He put out a memo for the entire intelligence community saying that the era of need to know is over. We are now in an era of need to share. You have to justify why you're holding information in need to know channels, because doing that is what caused 9/11 intelligence not to be shared between CIA overseas and FBI domestically.
Right.
And so we're now in the need to share era. And so I'm hoping that would, like you say, I hope that would open doors in terms of cooperating with our major partners. And let's not forget the Latin Americans. I mean, there are a lot of sightings in Latin America. There are a lot of sightings in Africa, in India, in Pakistan, there in Asia. We can't ignore the rest of the world, because UAPs are global. It's not just US, and all the metamaterials and crash retrieval craft, whatever they are, we assume they're from the US. Don't assume that.
Okay.
Some of that is delivered to us, or some of that is acquired by us from overseas sources.
Well, my dad says hello to everybody. UFO dad was in the house, so hello, Dad. Kristen Thompson had a question. Has John ever heard about Dr. Jacobs' nuke missile cases?
No.
Okay.
I've heard of Robert Salas's cases, and of course, Robert Hastings. He wrote a wonderful book about UFOs and nukes. So I've heard of those. I don't know if I may have in passing. So
Okay.
Remind me.
Yeah. Mr. Calhoun asked the question: Has John any thoughts on cattle mutilations, particularly why so oddly specific tissue samples are taken during these events?
I do not know.
Okay.
That's been a question for me that I've been asking myself. No, I don't know.
That is a weird aspect to it. It's
they just want steaks. I don't blame them.
yeah. It's just they take weird spots of the cow.
Well, I found an obscure. I found a very obscure reference to bovine embryos or placenta, and some experimentation with human embryos. And I got to go find that, because I saw that and I couldn't understand it because it was all written in medical language.
Right.
But bovine plus human, that's the closest thing I got to trying to understand it.
What would do you have any? And obviously you're familiar with the Galileo project. You're familiar with Avi Loeb. Do you have, if you were able to give any advice when it comes to looking for these objects, what sort of advice would you give to the Galileo project?
I don't know. I'm talking to look. Avi Loeb is an astronomer. I'm just like a dime a dozen political scientist with a BA degree, right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I would think that I'm hoping the James Webb Telescope, which is now delayed until 22 December, will go up and provide us with a source of data, because that telescope is designed to see far more of our universe in light spectra we've never been able to see before. And hopefully they will be able to see things that they need to track. Whether there are other objects like Oumuamua coming in and out that we can't detect, something like the James Webb Telescope might do what the IR sensors in our NRO satellites did for us. All of a sudden we see, oh my gosh, the solar system is full of Oumuamua. They're all coming in and out all the time. I mean, I don't know if that's going to happen. I'm hopeful that might be a source that Project Galileo would be able to look at. But the fact that something like that project is included in that legislation, that provides me, and SCU as well.
Right.
That provides me with a lot of hope that now it's not just because Congress is going to make this a law. The military can't say, the Defense Department can't say, no, it's all going to be squirreled in the DoD channels. Now they're forced to participate with science. I want scientists to participate, not just government, government scientists, but all scientists, because I was hoping, imagine when Braswell the rancher, instead of going to the base, he went to New Mexico State University or University of Mexico and got them to look at it. And we wouldn't have the secrecy right now. And I'm hoping that this will open up doors so that we can have an honest dialogue about exactly what we're dealing with. And the fact that government
Sorry, finish.
No, I'm hoping that the government would then be encouraged because now they have the Congress and its oversight function be encouraged to share information about what they're holding back, including what we're flying. That needs to be shared too.
Well, there's also, somebody, I can't remember who coined this, but somebody mentioned, the sky's not classified. And I think that
Avi Loeb.
Was that Avi? Yeah. So, I think this is coming with or without the government. It would just be nice if the government would get on board and sort of speed this up a little bit because we all know that they have the sensors, they have the data that's been collected. It sounds like since at least you've been around, as far as these satellite systems are concerned. But somebody asked a question, you kind of answered this earlier, but said, what kind of evidence did you see hybrid briefings to make you believe in
Evidence,
these hybrid? Go ahead.
Evidence, I mean, they didn't show me like pictures of hybrids,
Right.
They just said humans are hybrids. And I came in already believing that.
Right.
As you know, I was an experiencer, and that kind of was like part of my download that we are hybrids. And it was my way of thinking, okay, there's a missing gap that anthropologists say that there's a missing gap. Why aren't we like the primates I see, in the wild? Why are we who we are? And so even if you're religious, whatever religion you are, there's always a creation story. There's one in Genesis. If you are a fundamentalist right-wing Christian, and I don't mean to disparage anybody's religion, but using that as a category, and maybe it was wrong for me to say right-wing, but fundamentalist Christian, let's say you're that, and you believe in the Bible as a literal word of God, everything, like the universe was made in 6 days and the seventh day God rested. Right. You would look in there and say, some divine being made us in their plural image. Let us make man in their image. That right there, that's hybridization.
There's also a serpent in Eden, so I guess there's your reptile.
And exactly. And so I'm saying, like, if you go back to Chase Brandon's novel, and you go back to what I've always believed, that we're worshiping the wrong side. We're worshiping the side that wanted to like slow our development down, to suppress us, whereas the side of enlightenment, Lucifer, enlightenment, that side wants to elevate us, to know that we are also divine like our creators. And for that, they got tossed out of the garden.
I just like to throw in, from the DNA record, the academics would posit that the reason that we're unique in our ecosystem is because we killed all of our, the other Neanderthals and the other intelligent humanoids. So that's, one possibility.
Well, they just didn't survive. I mean, we just had the makeup. Yeah. We were more robust in surviving. Whereas if you look at my blood, I'm Asian, you'll see Denisovan DNA. If you're European, you might have Neanderthal DNA. There are other types of categories of DNA. Yeah, I mean, that I don't have evidence of that. But now, if the CIA will let me say those names, there are two people that somebody like Leslie Kean can knock on their door and say, hey, I heard this, Yeah. And so what do you know about this? What can you say about that?
Are you still in contact with these folks? And if so, do you think, how badly do they want to talk about this? Like,
do any of them?
Full disclosure is this. When I did my presentation and I sent it off to CIA, I also had a great interest in contacting Jim Simivan and Lou Elizondo, those two in particular. And I have contacted them as a professional courtesy. I know they're doing important work. And I want to make sure that anything I say or do does not impede their work.
Right.
And I offered them saying, hey, if you want to acknowledge that I know you, in the context I know you, go ahead. But that doesn't mean that you endorse my work. My work is my own. And they're fine with that. So going back to rather trying to find who I was, if someone bothered to contact Jim or Lou, they would have said, yeah, we know him.
Yeah.
And Kit Green as well, Kit.
Yeah.
They know who I am.
Chester Hunter with a $20 super chat. By the way, guys, thank you so much for all these super chats. Truly appreciate it. Makes the show exist. So thank you. John, were there any folks who invited you and aware of any of your personal anomalous experiences?
Invited me to that meeting?
He's not specific.
Were any of the folks who invited you?
Oh, I'm guessing they're talking about the meeting. Yeah.
It was well known that I was into ufology, because when that occurred, and I think I'm bad with time compression. It's been so long ago. I think it was 2001, before 9/11, because 9/11 didn't happen. I don't think it happened. We had academics from all over the country flying into Washington, and immediately after 9/11, it was a lot tougher to fly anywhere. So I think it was before 9/11. It was 2001, and by then they were well aware of my interest. And those academics, I wish. Here's the tragedy: it was unclassified agenda, unclassified sign-in sheet. I tossed them in the burn bag when I retired. I just, because I think I'll never have to deal with this anymore. And so, I knew what I knew, and I was happy with what I knew. I wish I had kept the agenda and the sign-in sheet, especially because it listed names. But I know 4 names on that were CIA officers. By the way, Pandolfi wasn't in that meeting. I can say that because I know who Pandolfi was, and he wasn't there.
Okay.
There was no Ron Pandolfi at that meeting, although he worked for the same office.
Me Cutter with a $5 donation says, rather save my soul. Great show, you guys. Got to listen on the KGRA app while I was out and about today for the first 30 minutes of the show. Thank you so much, Me Cutter, for the donation. John Brusso with a question says, hi, John. Thank you for your service. Is your CIA medal made from 999 silver? If so, is it engraved along the side edge of the medal?
I don't know what.
Is this a guy trying to steal your medal?
I don't know what it's made out of. I don't know. I don't see any engravings around it. But again, there it is.
That's awesome.
And I don't see any engravings around it. I don't know what they look like now, but this is what they gave me in 2010 for service complete in 2009. So there it is.
Artist service, by the way.
Yeah, well, that's the one thing that I perked my ears first when I first heard you, John, is why you're doing this and and your motivations. That was the one thing where I was like, oh wow, that's actually quite refreshing. I want you to explain that real quick, but before you do, Artisan Tony says for $10, rather is a high level hybrid and trying to bury it. I believe that. If there's anyone on this panel that's a hybrid, it's rather be squidding. But yeah, if you could go ahead and just tell the people, because that's a big question, right? That we keep hearing pop up is why now? Why now?
Why now is, first of all, when I retired in 2009, basically I retired, and basically I was just like working around the house, renovating my house. I recently purchased in my retirement and just doing yard work. I mean, I was done with it. And I still had an interest. I still watch YouTube videos and whatnot, but basically nothing really progressed from 2009 until 2017. And when TikTok was released, when we found out there was something called AllSap and something called ATIP, before that, I was like everybody else. I was like listening to Coast to Coast AM. And I don't think Jimmy Church was doing his Fade to Black then. I think he was the guest host back in that era. So all the way back to Art Bell, to George Nuri, I was basically interested in this. And I was just listening to what other people say. And I go, that guy's an imposter. I can tell because the way he talks and what he described doesn't exist. And then, but, never mind about that, but in 2017, when people start that really elevated the discussion. And all of a sudden we learn about AllSap and 2008, 2010, and Senator Reid funding and all that. And everyone believed that, that's when the government really, but you guys know that the government is always doing this.
Right. And
never talked about it. But there was this, the fact that I know that when we saw the orbs, that brought it out of the UFO era into the UAP era. And we started to investigate this earnestly. Like I described in a previous interview, these were no longer your grandfather's flying saucers. These were different phenomena. And what went on in Skinwalker Ranch before then, that high strangeness and all that. And they go, well, this wasn't just about AllSap. Stuff happened before AllSap.
Yeah.
And so that motivated me to, how do I present that story? And so that's what motivated me to talk more about, the first part of that briefing was about, suppose a UAP event occurred today, what would happen? What I describe is the actual process of what happens in the intelligence community when you see something like new and unusual. It doesn't necessarily have to be UAPs, but basically that working group process happens to the point that you write a report. And once the intelligence community writes its report that's coordinated with the other agencies, and it goes to the DNI, at that point, it's disseminated. It can go to the White House. So at that point, now we're at like 2008, 2007, 2008. That's what started. Okay, now it's on the DOD side. Title 50 civilians are out of it. Title 10 is DOD. Can we shoot it? Can it shoot us? That's DOD, right? And so when they took over, they had more of an aerospace. Forget the acronyms. Forget the alphabet soup. Something flying can hurt us. That's what they were concerned about. Regardless of what that study was called, that was the focus. Something is flying. Maybe it can hurt us, maybe not. What is it? If it can hurt us, how do we shoot it down? How do we defeat it? What is this about in terms of a national security threat to our forces?
Have we figured out defense systems or defense capabilities against these things?
Against them?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
That's a good question for Lou, and that's when he's going to say NDA.
Yeah, exactly.
I
think somebody's asked him.
I know this. I give you one thing. Yeah. I know one thing, and I can say it because it's an old system. There is a Soviet and now Russian era aerospace defense system called the SA-10. It's a missile, surface air missile, but it has aerospace capabilities. It can go way high. SA-10. Russia, they call it the S-300, and there's a radar called the flap lid because it looks like a lid pointed back. It's sort of like the Patriot radar in some ways. It's a planar phased array called a flap lid, and there were modes of operation we saw in that can track all kinds of aircraft, and with some ballistic missile and tactical ballistic missile defense capabilities. Well, there's one mode in there that all of a sudden they were producing tracks of something that was going really, really fast. So what the hell is that? They're producing legitimate acquisition and tracking of some object. Legitimate. So maybe it's a legitimate test mode. Nothing can go that fast. We don't have anything that fast. Neither do they. What are they tracking? It's just a test mode.
Right.
After the Soviet Union fell, and we start talking to immigrants, like Soviet immigrants or Russian immigrants who became U.S. citizens in this country. They left Russia. And we did identify that they actually worked on that system or operated that system. They told us we had a UFO mode in that system. And we looked at the missile that system was attached to, and it said, yep, that has some reach. And those missiles were nuclear tipped. Some of those missiles were nuclear tipped. And
that's an older system, you said.
That's an old system. That's ancient. There's the S-400 now, the S-500.
And that thing had a UFO mode on it.
Well, according to the information we received, that was a UFO mode.
Wow.
And so we actually got that system. Squirreled away in an interesting place in Nevada, I'll say. And so with my background in ballistic missile defense, I was with a partner, a colleague of mine. She and I stayed in Beatty, Nevada, and we traveled to this site, which just like you'll see described going to Area 51, there wasn't a mailbox, but the folks at the DOE 232 Energy Way, DOE, they gave us the badging to get to that facility. They told us what to look for in the road. So you see this in the road, make that right.
Right.
So we did. And we drove and heard shack of camo dudes. Oh, these are the camo dudes. And I said, wow, that's the real camo dudes. I heard about them. And, they badged us in and we went there. And so we tested the system out. And one night they told us to get off the mountain. Get off the mountain. Go home. Get off the mountain early. Because the rumor was they're testing a special payload. And so they didn't want CIA. We were told we were not cleared for what they're testing. So we went off the mountain. We went down. And the next day we came up, everybody was quiet. And they didn't want to talk about last night's test. And so they tested something we had against that system, which we knew had a UFO mode.
Wow.
And that's all I know. And so,
John, when you're saying that these are nuclear tipped and they have a UFO mode, the implication would be that they would be able to attempt to nuke a potential UAP. Is that right?
if it stands still for it, because I mean, you know, the kinematic performance of the missile is pretty good. I mean, some of these missiles can actually have 200 Gs, pull 200 Gs. So they're really good. The Russians are really good. They got good systems. So there you go. I mean, that's just one little tidbit that I'm putting out there. And the reason why is because the fact that we had this system was leaked to the open press. It was no secret. And as they were driving it out of Huntsville, Alabama, Huntsville is where the Missile and Space Intelligence Center is at. And they have systems there that if they were energized and activated, your Soviet and Russian systems, they could defend half the United States because those Russian systems are that good. They can shoot down anything within half the United States because they're Russian systems. So they're pretty good stuff.
John, I'm curious. You mentioned earlier that you had some experience as well. When you're referencing you being an experiencer, are you talking specifically about your experience with these sensors from these satellites, or did you have your own personal experience with UFOs at another time?
My experience with UFOs has been through what experiences will tell you, like instances where they knew they were awake, but they could not move. So I've already related, I think in a previous interview, about planting sunflower seeds so they grow into sunflowers. And I said, I need to plant sunflowers so they know where to find me, because I want them to take me and not bring me back. I want to go. I'm tired with, I don't belong on this planet. I'm from somewhere else and I want them to take me. So I planted these sunflower seeds that grew into sunflowers and out of my bedroom window. And I think I was in adolescence then. Yeah, I was. I like 7th or 8th grade, 7th grade, I'd say. And I remember like many hands pulling me out of my bed and taking me to a craft and being held by a being and laid down on a table to be examined. So that was like an instance where I encountered with a craft. And now, is it a dream? Is this something I dreamed of? I can't tell you. I don't know, but that's an experience that I had.
But you said you were young at the time? I was just curious.
Yeah, I was like 7th grade, thereabouts.
Okay.
The other experiences I had after I retired were actually seeing craft. And again, one of them was interesting in that I saw craft coming out of the clouds and making maneuvers like that, going back in the clouds. And the message to me was, tell them that we hide in the clouds. Okay, you hide in the clouds. What does that mean? I don't know, but it's an experience I've had.
Wow.
So I had experiences like that. The orb experience was flying from BWI, which is Baltimore Washington International, Baltimore Airport, to LAX, Los Angeles. And I was on a direct flight with a friend of mine. We're going to a UFO conference. And the UFO conference was held in Irvine, California. And on the way there, as we were flying over the Southwest, I used to listen to Channel 1, United Airlines, back in the day where you could actually listen to the cockpit comms. That right there tells me that was before 9/11, because after 9/11, you're not listening to cockpit comms anymore. But, instead of listening to country or classical or whatever music they were playing in the other stations or comedy, I would listen to Channel 1 because I was such an aviation geek, listening to air traffic control and the pilot, the cockpit. And the pilot described seeing an object. He said, we have a bright orange object coming across our flight path, and it's right in front of me, and it's now to the starboard side, from port side to the starboard side. I looked out the window, and there it was, an orange orb. It wasn't like a sparkly orange orb. It was just like solid orange. And it was like receding and stopped for, stopped. It wasn't really, it was moving with the craft because I didn't see any kind of like we were passing it. And then it flowed out, receded. And that was like an orb experience. And the other orb experience I had here in Arizona was looking out my balcony during a CE6 with Mark Sens experience, where I saw an orb.
We have to have you back.
We're out of time.
I knew this
I just got started.
I know you did. I know. I mean, we need a 10-hour show with you. I got a couple more questions. Let's just see if we can squeeze them in here in the next.
Yeah, we do it rapid.
So John Music says, being said, a lot more physically unidentifiable hybrid looking females are here recently. Bigger eyes, smarter, taller, maybe telepathic. I've seen them too. What do you think is the end game that we're getting replaced?
No, we're not replaced. I don't think we're being replaced. By the way, get her phone number. Ask her the questions. She might have the answers. I don't think we're being replaced at all. I think they're revealing themselves to us because it's part of the equation of knowing who we are, where we came from, and knowing why they're here.
Okay. And then there was one other question here from Citizen Witness from Sean Rash. He was asking about, Sean, I'm looking for it right now. And by the way, shout out to everyone who's sending questions. I hope I got to all of them. I see that we had Mick West for the whole show today. So Mick, what's going on? Spaghetti Lee, all of you guys out there, thank you so much. Here's the question. Does John know about the Black Horse transmospheric vehicle? Transmospheric vehicle?
Yeah, the atmospheric
vehicle, maybe. Yeah.
I've not heard of that. I've heard of the Black Knight.
Okay. Oh God, we got to talk about the Black Knight. You
just dropped that bomb
right here at the last second. Jeez. Okay. Manny Miranda with a question, Mr. Ramirez. Could you give an ELINT specialist perspective on why UAP's ability to remotely access closed-off nuclear silos?
They're closed off, but that doesn't mean that, the airspace is secure. That's because on the map it says it's a secure airspace. Doesn't mean you can't fly over it. You might be breaking a lot of laws, but it's not like it's secret.
Right.
We know where, you can find where all the silos are.
Okay, last question. Why do you think orbs are attracted to fighter jets, biggest, fastest earthly objects?
I don't know. I said before, they want to be seen. Maybe they want to be seen. They want to pose for pictures. I don't know, but who knows? That's ask a naval aviator. There are no Navy pilots. There are only naval aviators, and they love hearing that.
There you go. Mr. Ramirez, I cannot thank you enough for this interview. This was a lot of fun. I loved seeing your medal. I loved watching Rather Eat Crow a little bit here live on our show. It was an absolute blast. I can't thank you enough, and I will be in contact with you very soon.
Thanks for having me. Enjoyed it. It went by fast.
Pleasure. Really fast. So I appreciate it. I'm glad it went by just as fast for you, and I will be in contact soon. We're going to do a follow-up to this. Thank you again for your service, for your patience, and answering all the questions that you could in the time that we had.
All right.
All right, sir. We'll see you soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Sean.
Oh, guys. Okay. That was amazing. We've got 2 minutes left to end the show. We should probably continue this in Discord, but I want to get Brooks's quickly, your sort of initial thoughts, Brooks.
Absolutely. So, from my perspective, it's John. He knows what he's talking about. From really everything on the defense industry, he seems very aware of it. I don't really have any major concerns about his background being in the CIA. Not that I'm an expert on that by any means, but from my limited exposure, I think that he knows what he's talking about. There's two big topics I really want to hear if we do a follow-up. One, I want to hear him talk more shit about Neil deGrasse Tyson. And then the other one is we only very briefly got to hear part of his experiences and his interactions. On Andy's interview, he definitely went into more depth about some medical procedures and some diagnostic testing that's been done, as well as his FOIA release that he's requested for his own personal medical record so that he could share what it is that the CIA doctors are experimenting on. So I'm very curious to see what that would look like.
Look what the people are asking for, Brooks. A link. He doesn't have one. Dude, we're gonna get him. We're gonna get him. You got to make a Twitter. We need one for you. All right, you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review. Your home for credible news, reviews, commentary on everything UAP, UFO, science, emerging tech, and futurism. My name's Luis Jimenez. Rather be squidding. Michael Mataluni. Brooks Lopez. Want to say thank you to John Ramirez. Man, what a hell of a show, you guys. Have fun. Have a great weekend. We'll see you in the Discord. Be safe out there. Peace.
Take care, everybody.
I'm going to tell y'all right now, all of these wonderful people would not be here without Patreon supporters like you. If you enjoy credible news, reviews, and commentary on UFOs and UAPs 5 days a week, you want to support this show. What's your name? Marty. Marty, look how easy this is, Marty. Pick up your phone. Boom! You're a Patreon member. I mean, look, it's so easy. You just click the link, which is right here. Just for $1 a month, you can support this show. Just fill out the information and pledge what's comfortable for you. It could be $1, $5, $10, or who knows. Just support.